everybody, welcome back to What Happened to You. Today I'm joined by Mario Adrion. And just to clarify, is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yeah, I mean, it's Adrion. It's a French last
Adrion.
name, but I sound like a little douchey and pretentious when I say it like that, you know? So I just say Adrian, you know?
Okay.
My first name, technically, it's like, it's a Mario, you know? That's how I introduce myself.
Yeah.
I'm 100% German, though. People get confused, you know? As an Italian first name and French last name, but I did my 23andMe. I'm 99% German. So it's,
Wow.
I guess, German as it gets, yeah.
That's wild.
I was surprised, too, yeah.
So Adrian or something. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what the German pronunciation.
Adrian,
Yeah. Okay. I love it. Well, Mario Adrion is a YouTuber, model, and fellow stand-up comedian who I was lucky enough to meet at a mic, I guess last week, maybe a week and a half ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here, man. I'm excited to hear your story.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I met you at the mic and I loved your energy. You know, we had like a similar story. So I'm glad you invited me to come on here.
Oh, yeah. Dude, it's my pleasure, man. That mic was so funny because, like, you know, whenever I did the molestation material, and whenever I do that material, generally somebody has some sort of a reaction to it, whether, you know, they were also molested or had a similar experience of some kind. But I rarely have somebody who goes up on stage after who's like, hey, I had a similar experience, and then talks about it on stage and is funny about it too. And like, as soon as you did that, I was like, got to do a podcast. Like, it's just too perfect in timing.
It's tough sometimes because I love that you did that and you are able to talk about it even in a comedy setting, which is, you know, some people would say it's inappropriate, but I love the freedom that we can actually make, you know, I mean, turn anything into comedy, you know, whether it's something positive or negative, it's just real, you know, and it's authentic. So yeah, I love that.
I totally agree, man. Yeah, it's definitely not for everybody, but the people that like humor and using humor as a coping mechanism, as an introduction to these deeper conversations, I mean, it resonates so hard with people. And I know for me, like, I would not be anywhere near the spot that I'm at now in terms of healing had it not been for humor. I didn't even talk about this at all until I started laughing about it for the most part. And now I can't stop talking about it. So it's humor's an amazing thing in that way, for sure. Well, thank you so much for being here, Mario. What happened to you?
I mean, what happened to me is I decided to get into one of the most competitive industries, which is the fashion industry in New York City. So, I mean, to go back a little bit, I'm from a small town in Germany. And when I was like 18, 19 years old, I had the chance to go to New York, like a scout on Facebook. That's how you know how old I am. You know, on Facebook, he reached out to me and he was like, hey, Mari, you should come to New York to be a model. You know, and I was like, you know what? I always want to follow my impulse and do the things that are like sometimes a little bit unconventional, but that I'm also afraid of. So I just took the leap and just went to New York City, and I was studying psychology at the time in Berlin. And then get into this industry. And the fashion industry, like a lot of people don't know about this, but the fashion industry is a highly sexualized industry, not just for women though, but also for men. And I happen to do a lot of like underwear photo shoots, you know? So it's very sexual. A lot of the focus is on the male body and the physique and the sexiness. I mean, sex sells fashion. It's not a secret, right? And then after a while, I mean, I started having my first couple of photo shoots, and the nature of it, of course, you are oiled up on a photo shoot set in underwear, you know, and most photographers and also the fashion industry, most people who call the shots are gay. Which is just the nature of the fashion industry. You know, a lot of creative industries, like gay men especially, have a lot of power, which I think is great. There's a lot of like great people in the industry who bring it forward, who are very creative, you know, a lot of designers. Yeah. But there's also a lot of like men who then know that they're in a position of power, that then they think they can abuse that power. You know, you have to imagine you're a young model in New York City. You're 18 years old, and the competition is insane. The best models in the world are there. There's so many dudes who have the same abs, the same jawline, you know? And I mean, it's true. I mean, so many dudes technically look like you, and they all go in for the same job. And people think like modeling, you have like this glamorous lifestyle, but it's not necessarily true, because most models I know are broke. You know, they live in New York. I lived in a model apartment with 8 guys sharing one bathroom. And I had to pay for my visa, which is like $8,000 for my visa. So I was in debt technically with my agency when I first came to New York. And yeah, there's not a lot of jobs, you know? So then when a photographer had a photo shoot, that's how it started, right? Photographers would like, you know, start by making like compliments, right? And I'm totally cool with that. It took me a while. Like I come from a small town, so being around in such a gay industry was like, took me a little bit to adjust. But I felt very comfortable. Like I soon made like some of my best friends are gay in New York. And it was just, I felt very comfortable after a while. So whenever a photographer makes like some compliments, you know, and compliments how my butt looks or my penis looks in the underwear, I take it as a compliment. You know, some people would think that's like, it's, you know, if I don't feel uncomfortable with it, I kind of condition myself to take it as a compliment and then not take, you know, offense or any of that.
I feel like it just comes down to the intention and the way that you feel when the person is saying it. If they're doing it in a predatory way, I mean, you can't always feel it, but I feel like you can kind of tell the difference between somebody who's genuine and somebody who's
absolutely
trying to get into your pants, underwear.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. And you know, sometimes it's a nice compliment if they tell you look good on a photo shoot. I think that only like helps the dynamic of the shoot, you know? But then it started with a couple of shoots I did with also photographers outside of my agency, because you also have Instagram now where people hit you up on Instagram and want to shoot with you, right? So a lot of these photographers, they also pretend sometimes to be these big names who promise you everything. It's like in LA, you know, you come to LA as a young actor, female, and then somebody promises you they're going to make you a star, that kind of thing. So a lot of photographers tell me that they see so much potential in me, they're going to make me a star and put me on the cover of like the magazines and stuff. And then at the same time, they'd established that power dynamic of the fact that like they can help me. And I was insecure, young and desperate, you know, so saying no to things is very difficult, you know? So then it started by a photographer in New York. I remember one of my first shoots, he then came up to me and was like, you know, in underwear photo shoots, you put oil on your body. It's quite normal for the light reflection. And then he asked me if he can put oil on my body, you know? And I was like, you know what? I don't feel that's fine. You know, I have nothing against that. So he started like massaging my back and stuff. But then every once in a while, he would also like, while he was adjusting my underwear for the photo shoot, he would then like adjust the underwear, but then also like accidentally touch my dick, that kind of stuff, you know?
Accidentally, so, in quotes, potentially accidentally.
I mean, And so it was the whole vibe was very like, you know, flirtatious and stuff. And that would happen. I mean, this is not a one-time thing. This happened multiple times. My impulse was like saying something, you know, but it's difficult in that situation to address it because you don't want to be this like a narrow-minded German kid from a small town who's like, you know, like disrespecting this big photographer who could like bring my career forward, you know, and I want him to take pictures of me. And it's all about photographers. They have so much power in the industry because they're connected to like clients, and every single profession, I think, is like, it's all networking, right? Yeah. So I don't want to burn any bridges with photographers by saying something. And it's like that weird balance that you have between like, oh, what do I feel comfortable with? I want to like be authentic and speak up about things, but at the same time, I don't want to risk and jeopardize my career. You know, so it's like that. Yeah. So it's a very strange dynamic for sure. And I mean, that's like one of many experiences.
Can I ask you about like the initial like recruitment on Facebook? So somebody reached out to you and was basically just like, hey, I think you're super hot and I want you to be a model. Yeah. So is that like, you were 18 at the time?
Yeah. I think 19 18, 19. Yeah.
What's like the average, like, cause I know that there are like obviously kid models and things like that. And it seems like there's probably, I imagine people are reaching out to people that are underage as well. And I'm curious, like talent recruitment, I guess would be the term or professional term that they would use, and not, you know, attractive child identifier or whatever you would want to call it. But it's interesting to me that like, I remember it was when I first started doing stand-up in New York, there was this guy who did this bit about how, isn't it weird that Disney stars, like Disney child actors and actresses, always just happen to be super attractive when they get older.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like the bit was basically like, who has this eye for these like children that end up blossoming into these beautiful people? And I wonder if that's like somewhat similar in the modeling industry. Like, do you have people that are reaching out to underage people? And like, is that common, or are they fairly strict about being 18 and up?
I mean, depends what type of modeling, right? For all the underwear modeling and that kind of stuff, I think that's like more of like, I mean, you almost got to be 18. Like once you start shooting like sexy content, especially in this day and age, I think now even more so, people are more careful with that kind of stuff. Like I shot with a lot of photographers that that did like sexy underwear shoots, and they have a niche, right? They focus on that kind of stuff. And they said they never shoot people under 18, you know, because that's just like, it's weird. So, I will say though, with a child modeling, I don't have too much experience with that because I started obviously like in the clearly like male fashion industry. I think it's a little bit separate, you know, because as a child, there's a lot of kids who have a very commercial look, which doesn't necessarily translate into like fashion modeling for men, because also there's a huge height requirement. Like it's changing now with social media and more celebrities taking over like the campaigns and stuff. But traditionally, if you want to work as a fashion model and you want to actually work, you know, and make it a full-time job, you got to be 6'2". I mean, that's like a 6'1". This is like really cutting, you know, so you have that specific height requirement. And yeah, and then also there's different types of modeling, right? There's the fashion modeling, which is more of the runway stuff you see, like the high fashion brands, like Armani, those kind of brands, like the bigger Gucci, all this stuff. And then you have the commercial modeling, which is more stuff like maybe Nike, Old Navy, that kind of stuff, you know, Macy's. That's like more of the commercial vibe. So those are also very different. So I would say also with all the sexual harassment, it happens more in the fashion world, like where it's like high fashion, very prestigious, you know. I never had like, I mean, I shot tons of stuff for Macy's in New York, and I had never had bad experiences because that's like more of a corporation. It's more commercial. It's very well organized. And also, actually, I think in those fields, also more women work there. But when it comes to like more of the designer stuff, like especially in Milan and New York, like the high fashion stuff, that's when like photographers are these like artists, you know, and like it's almost like two separate industries, I would say. So yeah, and with the child actors, I think when it comes to high fashion, I know a lot of guys that were scouted when they were like 15 or 16. And because right now there's also a trend happening, especially in Milan during Fashion Week. They want the guys who look super young and androgynous. So there's like these dudes who are like, I mean, it's literally 16 years old, super skinny dudes too, who then walk for like a Prada as a perfect example, or Yves Saint Laurent in Paris, or Saint Laurent now. They're super like skinny, boyish guys. And those guys, honestly, they will work when they're young. But once they grow out, they kind of don't have that like look anymore. And then often they have like 2 seasons where they're killing it. You see them on campaigns, but then they're kind of out. That's when they're younger. And then when you're older, I mean, I have a friend, he's 36 now, one of my best friends. I make a lot of YouTube videos with him. He's a super good friend of mine. And he still works a lot. He just flew to Tennessee yesterday to shoot for Dillard, some underwear campaign, because he's got more of that like manly, you know, he's got a beard and stuff. So he's like, it's more stable after that time. Yeah. Gotcha. So I think it's like there's different markets too for modeling, you know? Yeah.
For sure. So going back to your experience, when this all was going on, and, you know, with that power dynamic, I feel like that's such a common theme when men and women experience sexual assault, abuse, whatever it is. What was going on in your head? Did you feel like you sort of got used to that experience, or did things ever escalate past that?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, there's definitely, you get used to things and you almost take it for granted after a while. It's strange how my tolerance now for sexual harassment is so high. So it's almost being normalized, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing, but I think like anything in life, once it happens to you so many times and so many shoots, you almost expect it. And I'll be honest, like I have been out of the modeling game, like actually like professionally for a while now. I transitioned into YouTube. That's my main job now, social media, now getting into comedy, which is like, you know, I have more control over my career. But a couple of weeks ago, I shot with a photographer in LA. I'm not going to name names, but like, we shot, and it was like some underwear stuff. He shoots beautiful stuff. Like he's out from LA. And I was at the photo shoot, and literally like, We were doing some nude shoots too, like implied nudes, because he does very high quality stuff, you know. So he then literally, I mean, I was nude there, and he said that he wanted to adjust something, and all of a sudden he literally just like literally grabbed my dick, and I was like, and the weird thing is, you know, in that moment I was like, I almost, you know, the normal reaction people would be that they'd be shocked or something, you know. I was literally in my head, I was almost laughing because I was like, are you fucking serious? Like, I felt like I was back in New York, you know. I was like,
Yeah.
It's a weird, you know, it's something, it's like you're jaded or something. It's just like something you almost expect to happen at some point, you know.
Yeah, like
I wasn't
again?
surprised at
Really?
all. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And I just told him, and it was funny shit. So I told him, you know, he asked me if I can, because there's a thing called fluffing, right? You got to like look good in your underwear and stuff, you know. So that's like, it's a very awkward situation on underwear photo shoot, because you have to look presentable, you know, because it's all about like having a bulge and all this stuff.
Yeah, there's got to be some blood flow before the photo.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Some photographers bring it up in a very nice way. They go like, hey, Mario, you know, we want you to live a little, you know, like that. That's like a nice way of saying it. I was like, okay, I fuck with that. But that dude literally just like wanted to give me a hand, you know, which I appreciate. He wants to help a bro out, you know. And then I was like, I just told him, hey man, no. I literally said, I said, no, I'm good, bro. You know, I threw in the bro too. It's like, and then he's like, okay, cool. And then we continued shooting, so it was all good, you know. But he made
the bro is like a gay deterrent almost.
Yeah.
Oh, nah, bro, I'm good, dude. I don't need a hand.
I don't even say that in real life. It's just like in that moment, it just came out of me. I was like, so yeah, that was that. And like I said, now I'm doing my own stuff, so I'm not really having to deal with that. But I will say it's gone a lot further than that. Also, I'll be honest. Like I had sometimes even specific offers. Like I had a photographer specifically tell me in Berlin that he's going to put me on the cover of this magazine, which at the time I thought was like this huge fashion magazine. Now I look at it as like it's some weird ass magazine that nobody cares about. But anyways, he told me he's going to put me on the cover of that magazine if he lets me suck my dick. Was that grammatically right? So he wanted,
if you let him suck your dick, he wanted to suck your dick.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, cool. And I said this in my stand-up bit. I'm like, yo, I was so confused because like he wanted to give me a magazine cover and a blowjob, so you like double receiving, you know? It was like Christmas. I was like, okay. Yeah. So that should happen. So it's like, it's not just like this vague. Often it's like this vague power dynamic where you don't want to say no to things, and they know that they have that power over you, so they know they can demand things and go further, and they can get away with it, right?
Yeah.
But then there's sometimes even like these super, like almost like a fucking contract, like here's the deliverables for a contract, magazine cover in exchange for, you know, that kind of stuff. I was like, it's so specific sometimes. And it might, I mean, I'm hoping also by having this conversation that it's changing a little bit with the whole Me Too movement, because I was modeling, I mean, actively, the peak was like 2016, 17. So that maybe it was not as, because now with the photographers, and I follow the news and stuff, there's an Instagram page called Shit Model Management or something, which basically is like a site that exposes photographers, agents that have been inappropriate. And there's also been a lot of photographers that have been canceled, like Mari Testino, Bruce Weber. There's been like literally the biggest names in fashion. Once one person comes out, male, like this is all male photographers, right? Yeah. Once one person comes out, like a wave of people just come out, and every single person that gets canceled, I've had a negative experience with. So I feel like, wow, because of the whole climate and the Me Too movement, it now kind of like a couple years after the fact, after I was in the industry actively, now people are being called out for that stuff more, you know?
That's amazing. It is so wild seeing how deeply rooted these, I don't want to call them traditions, but like patterns of behavior are. And it's like just in the last, I don't know when Me Too started, maybe 5-10 years ago, probably closer to 5. It's relatively recent. And it's just like this way. I mean, there's so many people, like the most powerful people in every industry, it feels like, are somehow related to these power dynamic, forced relationships, forced acts, and whatever you want to call it. It's it really is wild to see. But I agree, it is encouraging too to like see people like yourself talking about these things openly, because it feels like the best thing that we can do about it is just talk about it. And people are so afraid and uncomfortable to talk about it. And that's why I feel like you and I both gravitate towards humor, because it's so much easier to laugh about these things and then talk about it rather than just to go in cold and like fucking, it diffuses the tension.
And I love what you said about the, like some people might think it's like inappropriate, but I think it's so cool, like with comedy, to actually raise awareness for something like that. You know, it's like comedy first, but then you also like, you know, you bring awareness to a topic and you start a conversation, which I think is important, especially for men, because there's an organization called 1 in 6, which is like, I made a whole like fundraiser for them as well, that supports That's men awesome. Who've been victims of sexual harassment and assault. And then they say 1 in 6 men has been victim of like sexual assault or harassment, which is something that men, I feel like, especially as a man, you don't want to admit that shit, because like, especially for a lot of like, you know, straight guys, it's like, oh no, I don't want to admit because it makes me gay or something. There's a big stigma around that too. As a man, I mean, arguably you are supposed to be stronger, and you know, there's a physical thing where like, you know, obviously a woman sometimes just physically is not going to be able to protect herself as, you know, like a man could do. But it still happens to men, and sometimes admitting that takes a lot of like courage. So yeah,
I mean, that's one of the things I talk about in my stand-up, is that I thought that I was gay while I was getting molested. And it's not like, even at that age, I was, you know, 8 to 10 when it was going on.
Yeah.
But I was still having those masculinity issues associated with it, where I didn't want anybody to know about this because I was embarrassed that I would get boners while it was going on. Like, I thought that would all of a sudden invalidate the whole experience. Like, I mean, I literally thought that if I spoke up, that the guy who molested me would tell the cops like, yeah, I molested him totally, but he had boners. And I thought the cops would just be like, oh, okay, well, no worries then. Like, it's not like, it's all good. Like, don't sweat. So that's just like the logic that you're dealing with at that age. And that sort of idea that you can't admit to something like this. Like, I thought I had a hard time telling my first girlfriend, my first like serious girlfriend, about it, because I thought that she would be like, oh my God, like you were into a thing with a dude. Like, do you like women? Like, are you even interested in me? And, and we come up with all of these hypothetical scenarios for how people are going to respond when we do speak up. And most of the reason those hypotheticals pop into our minds, I think, is just conditioning. It's how we're told to behave. And
100%,
yeah, it's a very vulnerable.
Where you grew up also? Where was that?
Seattle.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's also, I mean, it really depends on where you grew up too, I think, because like, for me, I'm from a small, like my hometown is like a town of 1,000 people in the south of Germany, you know? So it's also strange because in my hometown, there's nobody who was like, I don't know, a single person who was openly gay, not a single person, right?
Yeah.
So that also adds, you know, when you grow up with that, it's like even harder to then admit to stuff like that. But now I've been also like, with my sexuality now, I'm like much more, I mean, I have to admit though, like it blocked me sexually for a long time. Because I for the longest time, for me, sex was not something I could enjoy. It's not an act of intimacy I share with another person, but I associated sex with negative experience that happened to me.
Yeah.
And I also associated sex and sexuality with work, because I mean, I'm a model. In a way, like my sex appeal, my body is like what makes me money, right? Yeah. So it's this weird thing when you associate, you don't keep the sanctity of like having that, you know, as something special for one person, but it's something you kind of share with people that can be like, it kind of subconsciously, I was not aware of it, but it really fucked with me in a way where like I had a girlfriend when I was 18 years old. And then once I started modeling, first of all, modeling is like so tough because I was not living in one place. I was trapped every 2 months. I would be in a new country. So it's very hard, obviously, to have a relationship. But also I thought I was asexual because I didn't have sex for like years, like 2-3 years without sex. And I guess I could have, but it's just like, I mean, I'm also very driven and I never put so much focus on that. And I wasn't interested in random hookups. But I think part of it was also like I said, you know, the fact that I associated sex with those experiences. So it kind of blocked me. And it took me a while. Now I have a girlfriend. which now opened me up a lot more to sexual experiences and to detaching from what I associated it with, you know.
Yeah, man. It sounds like it was almost transactional. It was,
yeah.
It's weird when you're having sex for a motive, like for an ulterior motive. Like in order for this to be enjoyable and purposeful, I need to be getting something out of it, or somebody that I'm with needs to be getting something out of it. And it's totally just a product of the experiences that you've had. And that's awesome that you have a girlfriend now and seem to feel differently about it. How has your relationship affected your understanding and sort of feelings about sex?
I mean, first of all, I got to say that we have such an open like communication, and speaking with her has also taught me a lot about like boundaries, because she has also had experiences with sexual assault with men, like straight men. So for her, it's always been a lot more. She puts up these boundaries way earlier, and she taught me a lot about keeping those boundaries for myself, and kind of, because I look at it almost like I'm aware that like my experience and how I grew up is very unconventional, you know. And sometimes I, for the longest time, did not with that sexual assault, which I didn't even mention fully. I was also, besides from all these stories that happened, should probably mention that story. For one job, I went to China, and it was for a modeling job. It was a very powerful client, and basically what happened is he, after the shoot, invited me to have dinner. And I'm very open. I love having dinner with people. I never I always say yes to things, you know. I never want to go, and I have an open mind to things, you know. That's, I think, what got me far in my life, always having an open mind to things. So I had dinner with him, and then after the dinner also went back to his place, and he asked me if I wanted to do ketamine. Ketamine is like a drug, right? It's like basically a tranquilizer, but if you take too much of it, you can basically it kind of paralyzes you. It can be used for like depression treatment in small doses and stuff, and it's got some, I guess like everything, good sides and bad sides. I had never done drugs before, you know. I didn't know what my tolerance was, but I wanted to have an open mind. And also I was in China, just did this job, things were going well. I was like, want to have an open mind. Also, I don't want to let this dude down, who now, and we had a good dinner. Honestly, it was very nice. I had a great conversation with him, and he did like a full line. I did like a quarter of a line, barely.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but for some reason I could not like fucking move. You know, it was crazy. I was like, I think what people call a K-hole. So I tried to move my right finger, and it just wouldn't like compute. You know, it was weird. And
you couldn't move your finger.
I could, like, I was laying in the bed, you know, and then I was like, I couldn't. Yeah, I can't remember exactly how it was, but I wasn't fully physically capable. I could move a little bit, but it was not like my motor
function,
like abilities were just not there, you know.
That's wild.
Yeah, and then also I noticed that, I mean, he was he did have sex with me in that time, yeah. And
yeah, man, that's that sort of feeling of paralysis, I think, is a lot of people experience, whether it's like literal paralysis via ketamine, or psychological paralysis, feeling like you can't say no or stop. That seems to be a common feeling associated with these experiences. But yeah, I mean, to be laying there and be like, wow, there's nothing that you could do to stop that from happening. I mean, that's a terrifying experience for sure.
Yeah, but you're right, totally right about the paralysis too. It's, for me, sometimes it's hard to say no, because also I'm a people pleaser. It's always been like that. It's hard to say no to my friends when they ask me to do something. You know, it's like everything is hard for me to say no to, but then especially in that situation, people have to understand also, if you're in a situation like that, and if it's not a clear no, it doesn't mean it's a yes, you know, because like sometimes you're just overwhelmed. And it's, you know, so I think people just have to read that fucking energy too. I mean, we're all humans, you know what I mean? So if he can tell that I'm not into it, I mean, it's not hard to tell, you know? And now back to my girlfriend, how she changed my perspective on it is because for the longest time I was like, in a way, and it sounds very cliche, but I was blaming myself. You know, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I shouldn't have agreed to the dinner. I should have gone back to the space. I shouldn't have done the ketamine, so it's my fault, but it doesn't fucking matter, like that's also one thing that like, I think is very common with people who've gone for something like that they try to like justify it. And for some weird reason, maybe it's like a Stockholm syndrome or something, like where you almost like want to blame yourself for it, but just agreeing and like honoring and knowing that this person is a piece of shit and acknowledging that was a big thing that just I processed in the last year, 2 years with her help also, in talking about those kind of things. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny, I feel like a lot of people say, it sounds cliche to say that I blamed myself, but that's what we all do to some degree. I mean, the second I didn't speak up the first time I got molested, I was like, well, now it's too late for me, because what everybody's going to be like, why didn't you say something the first time? And I blamed myself for that for every subsequent experience. It's like, all of a sudden I have this burden of all the people that are going to make fun of me for not saying something sooner and saying that I liked it and all of these different things. And every experience, it feels like the victim has some sort of a rationale for why it was their fault. And why. And the reality is, it's like most of the time you're not at all capable of making the decisions that you wish you had made at the time. Whether you're physically incapacitated like you, or, you're an 8-year-old like me and you're not thinking straight. Totally. I mean, there's a million different reasons why people don't speak up in the moment or afterwards. It's why it's so helpful to hear stories like yours and to hear the logic that was associated with these experiences, because it's so common. And I think the more people hear that other people blame themselves for these experiences, the easier it is to let go of that blame and just realize like, hey, this is just our response to it. And it doesn't mean that it's true. And the more, and I feel similarly, it's like, it's so easy in retrospect to go back and be like, oh, here's all the things that I could have done differently to prevent that from happening. But it's not productive at all. And at the end of the day, it's like people took advantage of us. There's a lot of catharsis that comes from letting go of feeling like you are the one who's at fault. Yeah. That last experience, was there another contract type thing involved with that?
It was a mix of a couple of things. It's just like knowing how powerful this man was. By the way, we're not talking about like somebody who's like a casting director or photographer who takes some nice photos. We're talking about a man who that's like something that's a little unique about the situation. I was in China. I don't know if you've been to China, but that's like, China is not like any other like Western country. Like the power this man has is like beyond like what rich people have in the US. Because like when we went to a hotel to have dinner, like he rented the whole hotel to have dinner, just the two of us. It was like some James Bond villain shit on that level, So I was in China and I realized like, I don't speak the language. I also was at a hotel, right? I had a visa, and in China, I had problems coming in with my visa. There was some issues. This guy made some calls. They fucking let me through. So he has like power over like immigration in a way. So I was like, that's another element of like just knowing how I don't want to fuck anything up because I'm literally in China. Because if I was in New York, I could literally be like, oh, if anything happens or if anything's uncomfortable, I could literally just walk out. And I'm on a fucking like, I'm in Soho and I just walk out and I'm in New York, In China, there's no way I can go anywhere. Like from his place, I don't know how to go back. By the way, you have no internet. That's also something. You have no internet connection there. There's no Google Maps because everything is blocked in China. I don't speak any Chinese. Nobody speaks English. So like literally it's like, it was crazy. So that was also another element. And then I think,
and if he's in charge of immigration, like if you were to say no or do something that could piss him off, like I imagine that your thinking would be, fuck, I might not even be able to ever leave here.
Exactly. Yeah. And he also this guy specifically made some promises to like, he told me that he can do some very like, great things for me financially. And I was very broke at the time. So he was actually offering to like, help me out financially too.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that meant at the time, and so that was another pressure, but there was no specific, like, there was nothing specifically where he said, oh, I'm going to book you for this job or, not that, but I just know that he has the power to do a lot of things. And there was like some unspoken pressure there, you know, in combination with like the whole Chinese thing I just mentioned. Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about an impossible scenario to get out of. Sometimes I feel like hearing other people's experiences brings clarity to your own in ways that you didn't even register. Like the fact that you did still blame yourself to some degree for that experience is like a perfect indication of like, because, you know, people who didn't go through that look at the things that you just laid out there and would be, I think most people would be like, there's no way you could have gotten out of that. Like that's like a totally is James Bond supervillain shit. And I think just knowing that no matter what the situation is, victims find a way to blame themselves. It sort of makes you feel more okay, I think, of letting go of those feelings, because you know that it's just the natural reaction.
I'm curious about your experience also quickly. Like, did you, about that specific person, do you feel hate towards them? Like, what's your feeling towards them?
I did for a long time. So we had to go to trial and he did not get convicted. And so he was just around. So whenever I would see him, I would get like super fight or flighty. Like my heart rate would just go through the roof. And that
sounds like a trauma response, right? Like
totally, especially when I was younger. If I would see him somewhere where I wasn't like around adults, I would just be worried that he would do something. I didn't really know what, but I
other people as well, right? Or just,
well, there was always that sort of fear, and I think that he probably was molesting other boys. Who knows? But mainly when I would see him, it would be for like my own safety, because I didn't know how he would. I knew that he was mad. You know, I mean, he was pissed that I had, obviously, you know, he wasn't stoked about me talking about this, but I just I didn't know, like. I think sometimes not knowing how people are going to react it can be worse, because your brain hypothesizes, again, with hypotheticals, like the worst case scenario.
Of course.
And I remember when I was testifying in court, he was in the courtroom for it, and I thought he was going to run across the room and stab me. That was just like my first thought when I walked into the courtroom, was like, oh, he's going to try to hurt me physically today.
Yeah.
It didn't even cross my mind that like that would be the worst thing that he could possibly do from his own perspective. So anyway, growing up in high school and things like that, whenever I would see him, I would feel that feeling, you know, worry, fear, anger. And as I got physically bigger, the feelings sort of morphed away from fear of what he would do to me to more just like, I think it was more just feelings would come back to me that I'd had in the past that were associated with him and the experiences that I had with him, like the discomfort and the, maybe it's the emasculating feeling of being molested. Maybe the feelings changed, and and I felt like I would actually get angry towards him. Like I'd get more aggressive. Like I felt like I could fuck this guy up if I wanted to. And I remember feeling that and being like, maybe I should, you know, but I'm still friends with his son. And so that was a big reason why I never sort of acted on any of those feelings, and never, you know, we only went to criminal trial. We never went to civil. Civil is when you sue them for money. And part of the reason I never have sued him civilly is because I wouldn't want to financially hurt his son. So there's all these other sort of elements involved in this. But I did see him over Christmas break this past Christmas. And it was the first time I'd seen him since I started doing stand-up comedy, which was back in 2017 was my first time doing it. And since starting to do stand-up, my entire perspective on this whole situation has changed from something that I was afraid to think about to now something that I not only am I not afraid to think about it anymore, but I gain a lot from thinking about it. Every time I think about the experience, or, you know, like right now I have the whole, here, check this out. This is the transcript from the trial. So it's 900 pages. And I've been reading through it because, you know, it's good material. And the more processing I do and reflecting I do, the less afraid I am to think about the experiences. And that makes me feel so much safer and more okay, and it allows me to let go of these feelings that I had associated with it all. So it sort of culminated when I did see him again for the first time since doing stand-up, and I saw him in Safeway, just the local grocery store.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel any of those feelings. I didn't feel any negative emotion towards him at all. And that was a really amazing moment in terms of where I was at healing wise and the progression. Obviously, healing's an ongoing process and it's still going. But
Yeah.
I realized I no longer am afraid of this guy, and I no longer am angry towards him. I'm not grateful towards him, of course, but in many ways, I'm now thankful for the path that I'm on and being able to help myself and help other people. None of that would have happened had I not been molested. So of course I would have preferred to have not been molested, but it happened. And I feel like so much of this is just the perspective that you have on it. And now turning it into something positive through comedy and things like that, I think all of that allowed me to transform the feelings that I was having for him that were so negative into an almost empathetic feeling towards him. And that was a good feeling.
Great. That's amazing. Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I'm asking this because because I personally, and that's something I've also struggled with, or I was judging myself because I didn't have those feelings. I never.
Which feelings?
Of hate. Like that's the thing. Like it's common, right? You hate that person, but even when I not think about it, I'm like, I don't. And that's maybe something I'm just like in general incapable. I don't know, but like I never had that feeling of hate. And sometimes, I mean, this goes deeper into like a psychological question, which is like,
oh, let's do it.
Is there a purpose? I thought about this, right? A lot of emotions we feel, right? Jealousy, from an evolutionary standpoint, can be explained, right? Jealousy makes sense for us as humans to make it to the 21st century because we want to connect with one partner and they protect us. It makes sense, right? It keeps us together. But I was thinking, what is the purpose of hate? Like actually hating somebody. And for a while, like I said, I was judging myself for not having hatred, which would be very justified towards that person. But then I was also like, what does that gap mean? You know, because I love what you said now that when you see this person now, you almost have like, you don't have those feelings. You have almost like a level of empathy.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's something that's why I've always been curious to hear from other people if they have like this rage, like burning hate. But I think you just have done such a great job of like healing and working through it that like you get to that point, which I think is great. Yeah.
Thank you, man. The evolutionary purpose of hate. I feel like that could be a book. I don't know.
I think so too, you know, because I mean, like I said, I study psychology. So there's so many, like, there's this whole evolutionary theory that every single emotion we feel has a purpose. But I have a hard time understanding, like love makes perfect sense, right? All this stuff, even jealousy makes sense. There's even a thing like, and that's what I find so interesting. I just read about this. Jealousy, men and women experience it differently, right? So women will experience more jealousy if their partner cheats on somebody else emotionally, whereas a man finds it harder to see their partner engage sexually with somebody else, which makes sense because if a man, like if a woman has sex with another man, she is literally taken. I mean, if he impregnates her, game over for you, for your own procreation. And women want more of that protection from a man too, you know. So if a man has sex with another woman, it's like, that's one thing. But if he's in love with another woman, it means he's not going to be able to protect me, my child. Mm-hmm. So, but hate, that's what I was like wondering, like, what is the actual purpose? Like fear makes sense. We stay away from the things that, you know, are dangerous. Hate, I guess it could be in the same category, stay away from people, but like, I think hate only spreads more hate. It's like the opposite of joy, right? You make somebody laugh, you spread happiness, it kind of multiplies. Same for hate though. If you hate this person, you express that hate too, you only like make him also maybe then be more hateful towards other people. I don't think it has any sort of like purpose. So that's why I love that you have gotten to that point. Yeah.
Maybe the purpose of hate is to let go of it. To be able to have an emotion that is so extremely negative that when you do eventually let go of it, you make room for love and about the opposite emotions. Maybe it's a stepping stone in evolution to have people experience what your life is like living under the influence of hate, or not under the influence, but living a hateful life. experience that, and then to decide, is this the way that I want my life to be? And then maybe that's it. I don't know though.
That makes sense. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. I love it. So a couple more questions for you here.
Cool.
When did you first speak up about these experiences, and how did it feel?
I mean, honestly, about the actual sexual assaults, I spoke up about it for the first time during the pandemic last year. I made a YouTube video because I was like, you know what? I always had this struggle with, like, I didn't want to use something like this because there's always the issue with YouTube. I didn't want to use it for like YouTube views or gain anything from it or get attention or something like that. Yeah. So that's why I never wanted to share that story openly, besides from, like, you know, all the stigma and the stuff that comes with it. So yeah, I had talked previously about the sexual harassment, but almost like in a joking way, because at the end of the day, it is like, I always struggle with what is, because I'm very open. I've had also experiences with men. I've kissed other men, you know, and I've like, sometimes I just want to be open to those experiences too. And I wonder, like, if it's I've had attractive photographers also hit on me and, you know, that give me a massage and, you know, even oral sex. And I was like, okay, this was an experience I don't regret. This is like not necessarily my thing, but like, I was like, I have an open mind with it to it, you know? So those things I always talk about openly also with other models and stuff, almost like in a joking way, you know? But the sexual assault, I first talked about it in, like I said, last year, pandemic, 2020. And I was not expecting the emotional, like how emotional it made me for like the next couple of weeks. Even when I told it now, the story, like when I think about it, I'm not like traumatized, or I didn't ever have that like traumatic experience that people expect. You know, I was, even after the next day, I was fine. I was like, just went back home, back to work. You know what I mean? Flew back to New York. It was all good. But when I shared that story, there was like something happened inside of me, and I was very emotional, like for a week or two, you know, after that. And I was like, wow, I was a little bit in denial of like that it did affect me, you know, of the fact that it did affect me. And then sharing it though was honestly, it felt great, because it didn't feel like something I did for attention. I mean, the video did extremely well on YouTube, but I think it still was more empowering than anything, because I wanted to share the story of like the angle of, hey, if you're a man, it's okay to talk about your emotions. You know, that's the one big thing on my channel too that I talk about a lot, is toxic masculinity, because I've experienced it a lot growing up in Germany in a town like with playing soccer and a lot of like masculinity and all this shit. You know, my family is a family of lumberjacks, and I was like, being able to share those emotions, and that's something I wanted to empower people to do. And I think I'm getting so many messages now from people that are really, really touching messages of people saying that me sharing that story has enabled them to share theirs, or has made them not feel like they're alone in this, and has, you know, and then that's something that just, you know, is the purpose of like why I do YouTube in a way, you know. It's like, if I can provide something like that. So it was definitely the right move to share it, but it took a while. Like I said, it took like, from when it happened, it took like 4 years to me actually talking about it publicly.
That's amazing, man. And that feeling, hey, I'm going to talk about this because you talked about it, and I don't feel so alone. And those, it really is like the most incredible feeling. It's so backwards. You know, people have these experiences and they feel like they can never talk about them, and they think people are going to hate them for it and all the other reasons they don't speak up. And then the second you do, it's like, oh my God, like this is, it's like you take the power back. All of a sudden, it's like, I'm not afraid to talk about this, and I'm not afraid for people to know about it. And you set other people free as a result. It's just this amazing experience that happens as a result of it all. And and you also said something there about denying that it happened, denying the effect that it actually had on you for a couple of weeks after. And you know, you said you just hopped on a plane and went right back, and that was exactly how I felt too. You know, I would get molested and just wake up the next day and, you know, go down and eat breakfast as if everything was fine. And you go home, go to practice, you know, and that's the coping mechanism. It's our bodies and brains not being able or ready to process these experiences that have happened. And it is funny because I also thought that that would further compound people thinking that it was weird that I didn't speak up. Like, you weren't even affected by this. It just seems like you were into it. And it took me a long time to even like say on stage and to people that I would get boners while it was going on. And, you know, it's the more you reflect on these things, and I think the more honest you are with your emotions and how you really felt about it, the more healing you're able to do. Because it really just comes down to acceptance. I think acceptance of like what really happened. What were you really thinking? And not feeling like you need to fabricate or change the story at all to please other people or try to preserve your own image or whatever. And it's just awesome, man. I'm really happy for you that you made that video and are now on, you know, on this trajectory and are helping so many other people and yourself. It's inspiring to see. And I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to somebody who has been through something similar and is hoping to get to the point that you're at now?
I mean, the easiest thing is literally openly communicate it, talk about it. As men, we often have this feeling that we can't. Yeah, you can't be vulnerable. You can't share any of your emotions, and because talking about it has just you have so many assumptions about that kind of stuff, and you always judge yourself for it. And talking about it with other people has just changed my perspective, especially with my girlfriend. Also, she encouraged me to make that video, and if I hadn't opened up about this whole experience to her, then I wouldn't have got to this place where I'm now, where I see this experience not as something that like takes away from my life. I think it almost like adds to my life and now gives me a chance to potentially help other people, you know, just like yourself. And it all started with openly communicating it. Because like I said, I didn't talk about it with anybody, not even my closest friends, not my parents, not my mother. My dad, for the first time when he heard about this story, was when he watched my YouTube video, you know? So that shows you that I wasn't talking about it with anybody. And the real healing started once I did. That's definitely,
I love it, man. I couldn't agree more. And you said that, you know, you're potentially helping people. And I would just say that you are definitely helping people, not potentially at all. It's happening. And there's honestly, like you're helping more people than you'll ever know. I would say that the majority of people who are probably affected by these things and see your content are not going to reach out, but that doesn't mean, you know, you're still doing an immense amount for them. They might not be at the level at the point yet where they feel like they can talk about it, but seeing somebody like yourself who's willing to talk about these things so honestly and without shame is going to be giving them the strength and a vision of what can be and what is possible. I'm happy for you, and I'm so glad that our paths crossed at the fourth wall. And check out Mario on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. Mario Adrion. Do you want to? Is it Mario Adrion on all platforms?
Yeah, Mario Adrion. My TikTok was deleted because I wore a Speedo, so they took down my account.
Shit.
Everything else is Mario Adrion. Yeah.
Okay, and that's Adrion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mario, thank you so much for coming on here, man. I can't wait to see you again soon.
No, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate that. Hope to see you around again.
Oh, we definitely will, man.
I'll see you. Bye.
Peace, Mario.